Good morning. I'm Peter Filkins. I write poems. I live in Western Massachusetts on a lake. I live in the same house I grew up in. I have had the same phone number my entire life. So those are kind of the relevant facts about me. I'll read some poems from my last two books of poems. We had the great pleasure of being at the Nelchi Center the other day, and looking out from the back lawn, we could see the fields of hay, particularly with the hay bales rolled up, the cylinders of hay. And we have these, of course, in Western Massachusetts as well, and that picture of that has kind of obsessed me in recent years. And I love just the kind of abstract sculpture of those bales of hay sitting out there, and recognize, too, the process that goes into them. I grew up on a farm partially myself, so I used to ride in a hay wagon when I was a little boy while the hay was being baled. And I wanted to read this particularly today because of the recent wildfires and the loss of pasture and the loss of livestock, and obviously the loss of structures and the devastation that's occurred. But of course, farmers and hayers have a way of coming back from that. And I think there are certain qualities in their work that we transpose to art and transpose to our lives too. Making hay. Dotting a fresh-mown pasture, they are abstracted, lozenges of green whose yield will feed a winter's hunger with a summer's field. For now they sit there, circumspect and salient as totems to another time, whose sickles and scythes seeded the baler's tines this sun-baked stubbled plain of timothy and fescue, configured with each pass, summer materialized in cylinders of grass. Yet, despite the sharp inflections of blade on polished stone, is there really any loss? Or is it dim nostalgia denying is for was? For it's haying that remains, patient, mindful husbandry, never quite out of style, so long as the scent of clover still carries a country mile to circulate among us, lost to screens and pixels, the freshet of this summer day, sweet with its own idiom, the musk-green smell of hay. At least in Western Mass, we have a lot of snapping turtles, and they come out in spring. Quite often on a back road you'll find it, and it's crossing from one, probably the swamp, to some pasture or lawn, which is sandy, where they can bury their eggs. And I was driving on a back road one day, and these things get huge. They're this big. They live for a century or more, so they're kind of prehistoric in both their literal lives and also their look. So this is simply turtle. Shy panzer of the swamp, atavistic in your haughty calm, you blink at us, encapsulated in our swanky Prius, crossing the road from the prehistoric world you're going to or coming from to lay your eggs in the sandy bed of tomorrow, knowing like the dead that however slow, it indeed will come, and does, even if absent of you, sanguine, curmudgeonly, immemorial as mud, or the memory of mud, propelling you on as you cling to your path through fan-tailed ferns that flood our eyes with green heraldry, fresh and real. I write a lot about nature, but I also write a lot of poems about paintings or artists. And one of my favorite artists is Monet, Claude Monet, and his wonderful water lilies. Let me find this here. Here it is. Which, of course, he spent the time during World War I painting. He was a very old man at that time, but throughout the entire war, he could hear the bombardments of the front lines, particularly from the Somme, where both of his son and his son-in-law did service. So while he was painting the water lilies, his sons were on the front, and this kind of juxtaposition kind of interests me. I must say the last word of the poem is sun, but it's S-U-N, not S-O-N. Water lilies. Meanwhile, he painted them. Lilies floating on the surface of a pond he'd constructed for the pleasure of the eye, and motifs to paint. At century's end, the new one begun with multiple explosions of carmine, coral, white, fleshy flowers against the backdrop of a subsurface blue with distances. The sky stretched out upon the watery calm, where a cloudy puff would later be captured by his brush in motion. Each day in the studio, another one spent to the echo of guns, bombarding the trenches, pummeling the Somme, erupting in billows of char-black smoke beyond a horizon no longer present, but subsumed, erased, immersed as he was in the flux of light on water, flowers astride turbid shallows beneath a willow and its weeping, our only perspective in a lost world lost to bottomless translucency, the eye that sees it, and the intractable sun. There's a lovely poet, Irish poet, by the name of Michael Longley, who's quite old now and not doing so well, but he's a poet I've followed most of my life, and I really encourage you, Longley, L-O-N-G-L-E-Y. And I was reading some of his poems a few years ago, and I thought to myself, I wish I could write like Michael Longley. I mean, I would just sort of give anything to be able to write like him. And indeed, a poem came out of that, particularly focusing on a moment that I witnessed on the lake where I live, and that was a great blue heron swallowing a pickerel whole one day. And you could see it go down its throat. And the heron stood there for about half an hour because it was so heavy it couldn't even fly. This is called Epiphany. I wish I could write like Michael Longley. Let me start again. He lives at a place called Carrigskeewan in western Northern Ireland. I wish I could write like Michael Longley, flower besotted at Carrigskeewan, where the birds' winged monikers still hover, chiffchaff, whimbrel, curlew, sanderling, near-tide poodles awash with otters foraging mollusks and snails to the peep of plovers skittering sea-reach on slick-back sand. And not this grab bag of eagles, muskrats, the heron's slate stillness, unbending to strike quick as a thought, the length of pickerel, now threading the dark of its S-curved gullet, a wad of cash in an old crone's bedroll, the heron a woodcut, motionless epiphany. I wish I could write like Michael Longley. I sent it to him, and he very graciously wrote back and was very pleased. I'll read the first poem and the last poem from the previous book, The View We're Granted. I grew up in a house where I live in the house where I grew up in, and outside my bedroom window there are two enormous white birches. Birches don't tend to get that big because they're very fragile. And eventually we had to cut them down. A limb came through the roof one night, and that said, yeah, you better cut these trees down. And then the bill came. And this is often how poems start for me. The bill, first line of the poem, topped, dropped, and chipped a dead white birch tree, $250 was the bill. And I said, thank you very much. Dismantling the birches. Topped, dropped, and chipped 2 dead white birch trees, reads the bill, arriving 1 week later. The damage, labor, and equipment, $250. Though it's no sure bargain, blithe, empty air, now all that's left of what once stood, who knows, a lifetime, a century? Their tall, swaying might, reduced to firewood, will burn this winter. Still, it was time. The birches too near the house. One windy night, a heavy limb broke loose, waking us with a thunk so loud We thought the end of sleep had come, our roof done in and leaking through November's bony cold, until next morning workers broke the news. Nothing for it. Those trees were coming down. Summer, morning, a locust rising wine, the day a promise caught in each flickering leaf. As a boy, I loved their white thrusting shoots rising like a massive V outside my window, each trunk's diameter twice my arm across, the scarred, papery bark, a sheet inscribed with twists and leanings, weather written in. How many summers had they seen? How many kites had disemboweled flight among their branches? And who could know what kind of pure good luck had let them grow so tall? Lightning blast and blight, drought and shearing winds, the gamut of experience as like to strike them down as nurtured lasting reach into a pale blue sky. I blink my eyes, but yes, they're really gone, leaving behind an absence that becomes them. Sawdust and firewood cleared away as well, the view pried open to reveal a landscape, one never really seen before, that hilltop, iron gray in autumn, a stillness loud with geese on their necessary flight above the trees. No time for one more, Amy?
Well, you can actually move on to questions.
Okay, let's do that then. That's fine, thank you. Yeah, please.
I love coming to Jentel Presents because it's like you get to be around people who are the most themselves.
Uh-huh.
And when I met you last week at the Nelty Center, it was like, oh, that guy's definitely a poet.
Wow,
Today,
that's fun.
I see even more so, like, this is like the most you're.
What gave it away?
My question is maybe a little impertinent, but if you weren't a poet, what would you be?
A concert pianist.
Is that right?
Yep. I can't play the piano, but I get. So maybe I should practice first, but if I could do anything in the world, it would be that, because I love it so. I love to listen to great pianists. And yeah.
And has music played?
Oh yeah, and music is absolutely, well, I hope you, yeah, and the poems are poems are, I think, very rhythmic, and music is absolutely key to their process, yeah. Lucas, yeah.
I was just going to ask about rhythm. Do you think about rhythm from one poem to the next as far as like the subject matter and how the rhythm relates to what you're speaking of, or?
I try. That's a very good question. I think as for most of us, it's kind of an organic process. I mean, what most often is a piece. I say this specifically: a piece of language will come to me. It's almost three-dimensional. It has that when that bill comes, top dropped and chipped two dead white birch trees. It's like, got that, and know that's where that's going. And it's usually then I find unsurprisingly a rhythm within it, and that will then determine the direction of the poem. It's not like I sit down and say I want this rhythm for this subject, but I find a rhythm pretty quickly. Yeah. Great, thank you all.